I could have been headhunting oil and gas executives, um, you know, but I
But
think,
that's probably not your why.
no,
Your why, by
exactly.
the looks of it, seems all about relationships and having that energy to start something, create something, exchange something of value, and allow that.
Absolutely. Fundamentally, you do it because you enjoy making books and bringing joy to people, and our books do.
Today's guest didn't set out to work in publishing. His career began with a sharp left turn, a dash of luck, and plenty of persistence. Along the way, he's taken bold breaks, worked with fast-paced teams, and eventually built something of his own, with a vision centered on getting books into people's hands in a new way. Behind the business he runs today is a journey of partnership, resilience, and lessons hard won. Welcome to the podcast, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. Let's start at the beginning, because your route into publishing wasn't exactly straightforward. How did you get into it?
And I briefly moved to London and actually worked in as a real estate agent in Holland Park, selling houses to a variety of, some famous, some not. But I ended up doing that for a few months just to tide me over. But that sort of gave me my first taste of sales as such in a working environment. But I then backpacked around the world for nearly 18 months, including 6 months in fact, over 18 months, including 6 months in the French Alps in Courchevel, and running a ski chalet. And one of the guests came out and said to me after the staying for the week, "What a great job done hosting." And she said, "Oh, I've got a friend in publishing. You should do a book about the sort of the duffer's guide to running a ski chalet." And I came back to London, didn't really know what to do. Just moved down looking for work, but presented the book idea to a Southeast London publisher called Arcturus. And as I say, at that point, I was just doing any jobs I could find really through agencies, and who then became my boss, Ian McClellan, and the first boss in publishing. He listened diligently to my pitch, and then phoned me back 2 days later and said the book wasn't for him. In fact, he didn't rate the book, but he thought it was one of the greatest sales pitches he's ever seen in his life. So did I want to come and have a job selling books? And I gave it some due, sort of a bit of consideration, and I took him up on his offer and started in 2001 working at Arcturus in Southeast London.
Wow. And what were those first few days or first few months like in publishing them?
It was really a lot to learn. I knew, obviously I've read all my life, so I know the basics about books, but it was a very interesting business. It was set up by Ian and David, and they ran it very lean. David had been, in fact, bankrupt in a previous life. So he was his business partner, but he was also sort of pulling the strings on the finances and stuff. And they ran it very lean. So there was probably 6 or 7 of us. And I was just brought in really as a sort of sales administration role to learn the industry really. And, I learned quite a lot very quickly. And like someone who wanted to move forward within the business, but also within sales, I then started pestering for accounts and how I could actually get out there and see customers. And I just kept asking the question, and eventually got given a couple of bones to go and try and chase down, and I did. And then, as they say, the rest is history. We moved forward quite quickly.
And what was it like? Do you remember your first sale you made?
I do. It was a book of how to draw comic book characters, and it was sold to a wholesaler based in Hertfordshire called Eagle Editions was the company. And it was, bear in mind, at that stage we were a relatively small publisher, and we were working in an almost exclusive manner with another wholesaler. So it was that delicate balance of, we couldn't upset them because they were ultimately paying the bills. I mean, at the time the business was turning over about just shy of £1 million, and and a large chunk of that was through the wholesaler in Leicester. So I sort of, me asking for this and asking for IP and content to go out and sell and try and get deals was, quite a big ask. So I got it, and I got it. And I can still remember it was two times 7,500 copies. I've always worked fundamentally in a sort of volume market. So I like to sell a high volume at a deeper discount as such, whether it's to a wholesaler, whether it's to a retailer. So, I think the whole deal probably made the business £2,000 to £3,000, gross profit. And that was that. And then it was, what can I do next? And how can I keep moving forward?
Yeah. Wow. And what was it like? Well, obviously working with your boss, did you, with Ian and stuff, did you pick up a few things from how the industry worked from him, if you were that eager sort of to get the sales and get the accounts going and grow the business forwards?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. So Ian, how I'd describe Ian is he's the most intelligent salesperson I've ever met, i.e. he's got a first-class honours degree from Cambridge in philosophy, so he was highly intelligent, unlike myself, if the truth be told, or certainly very academic, but he also just had bags of charm from a sales perspective, so he could get the deals done, but with this sort of real intelligence combined with it, which again, was something I just admired because, he was multilingual. He could just, he knew all about the great philosophers and stuff like this, whereas I'd want to talk about, who's called for Stoke City on a Monday morning or whatever. But, but what he did do is, just teach me the art of the relationship building. And there's, a few, and an incredibly talented publisher, I should say, because it was a small team. His ethos was we would create front covers, maybe one internal spread to show what the book might look like. And then we'd go out and pitch the ideas. We'd pitch the idea to a wholesaler. We'd pitch it to a retailer. And if they gave us the numbers and gave us the orders, we could then create the book. So it sort of took away a bit of the risk that can be involved in publishing. I mean, look, it's beautiful. I mean, trade publishing is a beautiful thing. People are creative. They take risks. They put their name to projects, big, lavish coffee table books. And it's wonderful, but it's not so wonderful if you spend £15,000 creating it and it doesn't sell. So this was a sort of different way of working. It was a bit more of try and get the pre-sale. And that all, again, stemmed down to it was run as a lean business. And it came down to his business partner, David, had been bankrupt. So he wasn't just going to be piling money in left, right, and centre. In fact, I'll tell you a good story about my first few months there. We used to get paid by cheque on a Friday. And David would insist on giving you, even though I was on a starting salary of £13,000 a year, he would insist on paying you giving you the cheque after 3:30 on a Friday, so you couldn't cash it before the weekend because cash was so critical to him, and it was just his ethos. And although it was deeply frustrating when you were on a small salary living in London trying to pay London rent, that was just the way. And that's not something I've taken away. We pride ourselves on paying our suppliers quickly and efficiently, but it was just always used to make me laugh. I used to beg for him to get the cheque, at 2, so I could run down the bank and
you could have a beer as well on Friday.
Well, exactly, yeah. And admittedly, beers were a little bit cheaper 20 odd years ago, but it was really good though to be learning, as I say, within that kind of keep it lean, take away the risk to a point is one of the first things I learned really in publishing. So it was a good thing to learn.
Which isn't quite you fake it until you make it, but you're putting ideas out there to see if there's actually demand for it before assuming the demand. So I suppose it's almost you're failing faster, therefore you'll know what the market is. Like you say, rather than spend 15,000 for a whole year, think it's wonderful, but everybody's gone, that was really good at the beginning of the year, but the trend has now changed this way, or I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the trend's gone a different way somewhere else, hasn't it? So that was your early noughties you did with that. What then you progressed into your mid noughties off the back of that?
Yeah.
Unless you want to say something.
No. So that's exactly it. So I started off there, and then and then it was all about just trying to build my own customer base. And then we did a huge amount of business back then with Barnes & Noble, the biggest book chain in America. And at the time, there were Borders, the other book chain that was obviously flourishing, or, well, unfortunately not flourishing because it's no longer with us, but it was certainly one of the big beasts in US retail at that time, and in UK retail and stuff. Borders stores were pretty much everywhere in the English language market. And And it was another one where I pressed in and said, look, I know you've got the relationship with Barnes and Noble. I know they have to have first dibs on, anything we present. But if you give me some covers and give me some ideas and maybe some spin-offs of stuff that's worked for them, I'd like to go out to Ann Arbor, which is in Michigan, where they were headquartered, and go and present to them. And that was probably within about a year of starting there. And I did. And the buyer there was a notorious guy in publishing. He was so brutal, so tough, sort of good American guy. I love working with the Americans. They're very straightforward, very straight talking, and they just want to do deals. So they're an absolute delight to work with. But he was, he was a tough buyer. He'd just make you feel awkward. I'd be there in a meeting room in Detroit as a sort of, spotty 23-year-old or whatever. And he'd just get up in the middle of the meeting and walk out the room and just leave me there for sort of 15 minutes as and not say anything, and then just come back in and go, I'll have 50,000 dream dictionaries. And I'd just be like, my life. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't know whether this is all part of the psychological warfare and incredibly tough on pricing. As I say, not someone I've come across again in publishing with his times quite brutal nature. But when he got the checkbook out, it was an absolute pleasure to work with. But we did. I did that, and then and amongst all of that, just expanding the customer base, and then taking on accounts from Ian. And very quickly, he then just promoted me into sales director role as the company grew. And then, so by the mid noughties, we were on a really good upward trajectory, growing, double-digit growth every year. We went, probably 1 to 2 to 4, over that course, moved offices. And it was just a great time. I was looking after all English language sales at that point, a lot, apart from stuff I'd work alongside Ian, but he was wanting to take more of a sort of back seat. And I'd go to Australia twice a year. I mean, I was single. No children on the horizon. I mean, it was just a good time to be alive. I'd say at my peak, I was probably 3 to 4 months of the year overseas or, on a business trip somewhere and selling books, and really hands-on as the sales director, even as I grew the team. So by sort of 2005, 2006, I actually had 3 or 4 people working for me, either admin or developing into sales roles themselves and into the foreign language, which is a huge part of publishing business, selling in co-edition in foreign language markets. But I never wanted to be the sales director who sat there just looking at a spreadsheet, looking at sales. I always liked to get out there and get in front of clients. So I always did. So even though I had a team, I still was probably bringing in 70% of the sales. There was a little bit of my ego, didn't want to give it up, but also I just thoroughly enjoy the nature of customer interaction and everything. So yeah, we were really flying along. Everything was good. Fantastic place to be in. He had great visions. I was going to run the business for him, and we did some option B shares. So he started giving me equity within the business, and then I just in a moment of joy threw the towel in. No, I resigned in the August to go backpacking around the world again. Unfortunately, I've always got a scratch that needs itching in terms of travel and wanderlust. So I got a one-way ticket to Brazil for the carnival the following January, and then came home 2 years later.
Where did the hunger come from to drive the sales? Is it the relationship with people? Because like you say, you could have been sat in the office looking at spreadsheets going, Harry, please work harder. Bethany, please work harder. Actually, that interpersonal relationship building, obviously you mentioned with Ian being the philosopher that he was, the good salesman, where did that sort of drive come from for you?
Look, I just think, I'd say fundamentally, I love interaction with people. Always have done. Doesn't matter whether I'm in a pub or in a sales meeting, I just love meeting people. And, so and that goes part and parcel really with a sales job, or certainly client-facing sales. But I'd say the real sales, I mean, look, I was a classic. When I left university, no one wants to be a salesman. It's a dirty word, and I obviously went in and did, estate agency, which, apologies to all the estate agents out there, but, they're considered some of the worst salespeople of the lot, aren't they? And, and it's tough, people just think, selling. However, you can sleep well at night knowing you're selling books. It's something pretty pleasant to be selling. But I'd say I'm just driven by meeting people, and obviously sales. You can, you can look at the fiscal rewards, and or that when I would go into CE in annually for my salary review, I would go in fully prepped with all the numbers I'd done him, and me thinking in my head all the money I've made him, and that would be obviously an important part of any discussions we'd have every year to try and get a bit more cash out of him.
Yeah. And before 3:30 on a Friday as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the good news is we'd gone into the world of backs by then, I think.
Okay, so that was good then. And with your time away then, obviously went to Brazil for the Rio. What did that sort of period of time there, did it change did it give you time to reflect on your career and sort of whether you wanted to continue that way or make a crossroads?
I'll tell you a bit of, do you know what? A bit of everything. I loved publishing and I loved my time at Arcturus. I did 7 years and I still see, and he'd never thank me for it. I call him my publishing dad. We go and have dinner at least once a year, usually twice. I'm now in a position where I can treat him to lunch or have dinner and stuff. It's nice to go the full sort of circle. I sort of went away from it. So, I certainly didn't go away thinking, I don't want to work in publishing. But then I knew I wanted to. I traveled all around Southeast Asia previously, or not all around because I've covered a lot more of it on this trip. But, I knew that there was a whole of South America and Central America that was uncharted to me. So I just wanted to go out and have some time and go and see a bit more of the world. And I love high adventure. And it just did. It gives, for me, I mean, with 2 kids, I will actively, I put money into their junior ISAs with a view that don't buy a car, go traveling around the world. I mean, that's my attitude. And, and I think it just gives you time to reflect on it. And it really did. I sort of had a brilliant 2 years and then came back, and it was hard coming back, definitely. And I came in and worked for a London publisher briefly for a year. And I definitely wanted to be teaching people how to dive in Malapascua in the Philippines. At that point, my head was not in the game. And, I did think, what am I doing? And, and I was bored actually. So, I think although it wasn't against publishing, it certainly wasn't against that employer either. Brilliant publisher. And it was a great fun office to be in. I probably lost a bit of direction at that point.
Yeah. And I suppose with you going traveling, you get to keep that relationship building, that adventure, new areas, new markets, which would be in your earlier career. It was like, can I go and try here? And you spend 3 or 4 months a year traveling, you're making those new relationships all the time. And I suppose traveling is an extension of it without the pressure of perhaps making sales. It's just, I've learned about that. I've got to go and see that tomorrow, or go to that place next week and try that diving and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And in fact, one of my biggest Australia and New Zealand client at the time was lovely guy called Steve Wright, and he kindly gave up his penthouse in Circular Quay in Sydney whilst I was backpacking, and he just left me the key for a week, and so there I was, sort of going drinking in Sydney, dive bars with all the other backpackers, and then returning back to my penthouse overlooking the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. And he said, you can drink as much wine as you like, as much champagne. I was like, oh, it's wonderful. So I did. I had a brilliant week in Sydney, lauding it. And but again, that was just from the relationships I'd built. And he was a good guy. And ultimately, he was making money from me, and vice versa. And it was a good relationship outside of that, anyway. Which again is something that all ties in with your travels and meeting people, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're not everyone's perfect, but it's always interesting to meet a variety of people.
And after your sort of that stint at the publishers and you lost your sort of mojo a little bit, did you then try and find what can I actually do now, or where do I go? What's my next step?
I did. So I then, in my wisdom, wisdom / moment of madness, I went and worked in recruitment for what ended up being about 6 months. So, a very good friend, one of my best friends, she did a lovely speech at our wedding, Lisa and I's wedding. She is a recruiter, and she just set up her own headhunting company. So I ended up trying to recruit oil and gas executives for health and safety roles at, serious level, like HS directors, sort of $200,000, $300,000 salaries.
Wow.
Across sort of industry, across oil and gas, heavy goods. I mean, just something completely different. But what the philosophy was that Fee always said to me, look, you're a great salesman. You'd be a great recruiter because it's sales at the end of the day and it's relationship building. But it soon became very apparent to me that it was 2012 by this point. The economy wasn't in a great spot. There had been the sort of downturn in 2007 and it was still spluttering along. But I like selling a tangible product. So it soon made me realize that recruitment isn't for me. But I gave it a real good crack. She paid me, enough to survive in London. But obviously the view is that you're going to get your big commission checks. And in fact, life could have been different. I got so close to recruiting the health and safety director for Caterpillar or something in Asia. Anyway, it was just a conversation that was evolving. And we got down to, it was a really close, and it would have been a £50,000 fee for the business, of which you trouser £30,000 or something silly yourself or whatever, and suddenly that's, it's sort of eye-watering cash, and then you're like, oh, you get 5 of those in the pipeline and that's how it all works and it's all the money. So I got really close and then he phoned me up, the guy in Chicago at the Caterpillar headquarters, and said, no, unfortunately we've had to pull it. And then I phoned up my friend I phoned up the boss of Hinkler in Australia, Australian publisher, and said, can she keep her ear to the ground for me at the upcoming book fair in Frankfurt? And then she phoned me back 2 days later and said, I don't even need to employ you, but I'm going to employ you. So she gave me a job.
Nice. Back into sales in publishing then?
Back into sales in publishing. So that was Hinkler Books based in Melbourne, and Nadika is the CEO, and then her business partner, Stephen. And so the two of them basically fundamentally own the business. And I'd known them for years. I'd sold to them for years. So I had a good relationship with them, but from selling to them. And they just said, yeah, look, they already had a UK sales director at the time. And they just said, look, we'll find room for you. You can sell a bit in America and sell some more stuff in the UK. Remotely working, so they're based in Melbourne. All I needed to do was go down there twice a year, which again, I was, more than happy to do. And she just said, come and work for me. And I did.
And then that transition from that, you then thought, could you do this by yourself? And it brought you to where you are now. Could you tell us a little bit about that sort of transition?
Yeah, so that, I suppose the takeaway things from there was by working with Nadika and Stephen, I was working remotely. So that's one of the first things it taught me, that having been in a reasonable sized office of, I think by the time I left Archer, there was probably 26 people in there. So I'd been in an office environment. And then when I came back and worked in London, there was 70 people in that office. So it was that. And then suddenly it was just me working remotely. My then colleague, who was still working at Hinkler at the time, she was in Bath, I was in London. I took a little shared office space with an illustration agency, just because I wanted a desk, to sit at and to have some people around me rather than be at home. So that worked well. So the first thing that taught me was the art of working by yourself and working in almost like a sort of remote environment. Secondly, they're two of the most talented people I know on many fronts. Again, just from the creative side, absolutely remarkable. Stephen, in particular, he's always just been one step ahead on sort of trends, and he loves taking a risk. Ian was quite risk averse. Stephen was a bit more sort of gung ho. He would say, let's fill a warehouse with 250,000 books because we're going to sell them. That kind of, he didn't actually do that, but it was that kind of ethos. And Nadika was just, fantastic. It's just like inspiring, really. She's just, again, saleswoman herself, but very driven, and but just the way she sort of ran the business, and a million miles an hour, but never sat still. Let me get on with it because I was on a different time zone, but really trusted me to deliver, and obviously it helped if I was delivering, and I did. I think it was just shy of 7 years in the end, and we grew it again into a lovely little business in the UK, a profit centre for them. It was probably turning over, by the time I came to leave, about £5.5 million sterling.
Wow.
We just had great fun as well. Stephen would come over to the UK, and we'd travel together and do a big trip every year for three weeks in February to try and sell all the Christmas stuff in, all the product for Q3, Q4. And then Nadika and I would do US road trips together. And in fact, we had some of the most hilarious times getting into, I mean, if she ever sat down with you, she would regale you with stories of horror, really, of me, trying to blag American customs, and us getting held in holding pens at the border, and driving her through South Central LA because I took the wrong turn off the freeway, and we were right down in the hood, and she's like, "What have you done?" I'm like, "I don't know. We'll just keep driving." But we had great fun, and that's half the thing. If you're going to work, as much as hard as you do and as much as you do, might as well make it fun, and had a great run at it. And we did a great thing together, and they looked after me both with support and like on all levels, really. Very, very personal, great friendship. And then unfortunately though, I then did quit in a blaze of glory. But and this one was this one probably cut a bit deeper, because I ended up actually working at their biggest competitor, another Australian publisher. But what I will say is the one caveat, and I think that as time has healed and our friendship never really went away. It hurt them that I'd left and had gone to a competitor. But in fairness to them, they knew, because I was a one-man band in the UK, they wanted to expand their UK operations. So they went into a joint venture with an incredibly talented publisher by the name of John Styring, who built and sold Igloo Books. And he set up his own new business and ended up going into a joint venture with Hinkler, which would have then involved me having my bosses, 40 miles down the road in Bath rather than 10,000 miles away. And my new colleague, he started phoning me on a Friday, and I used to play golf on a Friday because the Aussies were all in bed.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can't do this. I can't have my bosses, this close. So
No.
that is genuinely the reason I quit, for no other reason than I just got so used to almost being my own boss and working remotely. So we left, and they've now got a really good business with them, and wonderful. And it was the right call for them. It gave them an opportunity to really expand their UK offering, rather than just being me going around seeing as many retailers as I possibly could. So I did that, and then I worked for Lake Press, another Aussie publisher. Again, great people, lovely industry publishing. You don't meet too many bad eggs. And then and I was just sort of ticking along, and obviously the COVID years. And we did well. Publishing really thrived during COVID. There was a lot of, especially on kids' books, a lot of parents going out to retailers, just buying stuff because they were stuck at home with their kids, and it just happens, doesn't it? And especially, anything to entertain them. So in a way, sales were really, really strong. Business was all fine, but then came my epiphany, or whatever you want to call it, when I sort of thought the time was right to have a go myself.
Yeah. And what was that did you have to sort of get some people involved, or did you just think, right, I've been quite close to, I suppose, in the early days with Ian, and then obviously with the Australian people as well, you were quite close to people who had started the businesses. So I suppose you get to see behind the curtain. So you've already seen some of those things, and all, like you say, the volumes, your numbers, your metrics. Was there anything else that you perhaps needed to consider?
Yeah, definitely needed someone who could actually make beautiful books, because I can sell them.
Yeah.
But I couldn't I couldn't make them. Well, no, I'm being harsh on myself. I probably could make them at a push, but no. So that's it. So I mean, how the business evolved, or how Townhouse evolved, was just a moment. It was just during COVID. I sort of sat there, and it was fine. Life's ticking along. I had 2 young kids, and I needed to pay the mortgage, and late press have been supportive. I'd made them good money again, so I've always left with my head held high, because I know that I've made my bosses lots of money. So, as far as I'm concerned, that you can always, leave the door. It doesn't matter how you go. You know that you've done the right thing by them over the years. And so I just, I was sat there, and I had an opportunity to speak with our investor, and he's a silent investor, and so I won't start,
Oh,
chucking
yeah.
in names, but he's a great guy. He's yeah, I've known him for years. He's not within publishing, and he's Irish, and I phoned him after Ireland had beaten England again at the Six Nations in lockdown 2 or whatever it was. So it would have been February 21. And so I phoned him and said, "Oh, let me know, you've done us again." I said, "Anyway, I said, I want to set up my own publishing company." And he went, "Yeah, great idea. Yeah, you'd absolutely smash it." And he said, "Well, how are you going to do it?" And I said, "Well, I need to get a team." And his first bit of advice, and I'd go to him on many levels on advice. I'll allude to some other anecdotes a bit later, but I just said, "Yeah, I want to do this." And he said, "Well, get your team, but keep your team lean." And I always knew that, because I think I opened up with that at Arcturus. And but I knew that exact person who I knew would be my business partner. And I contacted Lou. She lives in Cheltenham. We've known each other from publishing for 10 years.
Mhm.
But I just knew that she was super talented. I knew that she'd set up a publisher, and it had been swallowed up in a big purchase by another big publisher. And so she sort of lost her freedom within that. So I just phoned her up, and we sat on the prom in Cheltenham, 2 meters apart.
Yeah.
Remember those glory days? We sat there drunk our coffee. It was freezing cold. And I said, "Look, I've got an opportunity, and we should go into business together." And we didn't really know each other, apart from just propping up the bar at trade shows and stuff like that, and bumping into each other on Cheltenham High Street. And she was like, "Yeah." But then she was very, she was like, "Right." I think not cynical, but she was like, "No, it sounds a bit too good to be true." And she was like, "All right, well, set up a meeting and let's go and see him." So we did. And yeah, it was fantastic trip. And he was in Manchester, actually. So we went to see him there, and proper Dragon's Den moment. We sat and we stopped at Crewe Station, and we said, "Oh, what are we willing to do here?" And we'd mentally prepared ourselves to give away 51% if we retained 49, because we just thought, look, it's risk. All the risk is on our investor. So we'd sort of mentally said that, but we sat down inside literally 5 minutes, and he liked Lou, and I liked Lou anyway, but he liked her, he liked me. She'd done all the business plan, 3-year cash flow, everything. He said, "Forget all that. I like you. What should we do?" And we just set up the business, and we got an equal shareholding. So there's a third, a third, a third. We keep it very simple. It's very
Right.
nice, just clean business. And, nothing gives us greater pleasure than, even though he's not involved in the day to day, there would never be a second thought about trying to buy him out. Nothing, but obviously my schoolmates say things like, "Oh, you're going to buy him out now? You've paid back your loan and everything." You're like, no. Much rather have him sat there as a mentor, as just someone, and fundamentally took the risk on us. And, I want to be able to sleep at night. And I think it's very important that you honor that kind of relationship.
But that then is a relationship and not a salesperson.
Yeah.
That's sort of, I suppose, a purpose-led brand rather than a profit-first or a business-first brand, and quite almost shaft people that helped you get up, isn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the most important aspects of business, really, and that's how you succeed. You work with people, and 100%. So yeah, that was 2021. We were incorporated in the October of that year, and Lou started because she's the creative. She's our publisher, I should say, as well. So she's not only my business partner, she's the publisher. So she comes up with a lot of the ideas. If they're not driven by a customer, it's driven by Lou, or a combination of both, or a combination of all three of us. And but fundamentally, she's a creative one. She's got a background in production, so she can take any item, and she has visions. She'll grab this and go, yeah, we're going to do a concertina book or something like this. It's going to have a mirror, and she starts scribbling it down on paper, and then she specs it. And then she's like, yeah, go on. And then the process is we then commission artists and authors, or we write them ourselves in-house, depending on how many words. But it's all born out of the team, which has grown now. And so we all come to the party with our creative ideas. But Lou is the glue that holds the publishing together as such. I mean, she's the operations director. She's the finance director. She's the head of IT. She's everything. Yeah.
We won't show her this then, just in case she comes and says, here's my appraisal.
Yeah, exactly. But
so for people listening, what is Townhouse Books?
We publish children's books, so mainly novelty board, sound books, board books, colour and activity, anything. We'll publish anything, to be honest, but we tend to specialise in that novelty children's publishing that a lot of big trade houses, when I talk about big trade houses, the Penguin Random House, the Simon & Schuster, they might have big licenses like the Gruffalo and Cat in the Hat and all these, the Hungry Caterpillar, they've got incredible licenses, or, and really, really fantastic authors and stuff, but they're not very good at doing the complicated style. So when I say complicated, say this is one of our new printed dummies. It's not published or anything. We take this to Frankfurt with us next month. It's basically a book. It's been created, but we create 40 copies. Then we go and try and sell all the print runs around the world. And what we're very good at is things that, little touch and feel sheep, interactive. And then you get inside the book here and you've got flaps and, just lovely
Which,
stuff.
dare I say, having children yourself and myself having children, is those books will then bring out dexterity, smaller skills, motor skills, rather than just having a lovely story read, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is.
That's I'd imagine nowadays parents are much more conscious of no or low screen time. Let's get some dexterity in. Let's get the brain working, get the motor neurons connected and that sort of stuff, let alone the texture and the kinesthetic feel of a book and applying to all of that. And you've had quite a lot of success with one particular book in mind, which was Sunny Vibes Colouring. Was that right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's been an absolute revelation for us. So there's been a whole movement towards, as you've just alluded to, off-screen time. And that's for kids and adults. Our books tend to be more directed towards the kids side of things. Sorry, I'm back on the screen there. This cute and bold
You weren't
colouring.
doing what you did in America, was it, when the chap walks out the room for 15 minutes and comes back?
Yeah. I just leave you hanging there. You can be like, what's he done?
Yeah.
So this art style. You can see it's very sort of young in appearance, and indeed, I think it's being bought by a lot of parents for kids. And in fact, my boys both love colouring these images, but equally, there's a lot of adults colouring these as well. It's a real trend that involves, you look at it, I mean, even if you look at the cover and the way we've designed it, the shading. So this is not just a question of getting a yellow felt tip that our young children would do and still have great fun. Adults are doing it in terms of, or teenagers, tweens, slightly older skew than my 8 and 7-year-old. But they're doing it's the multi-levels. So you've got all the, the fine lines. You're getting different coloured pens and people are just doing this and going mad for it on TikTok. It's beyond me. I'm an absolute Luddite. I sell paper-based product. I mean, I put pictures of the boys playing football on Instagram, and that is about it. I am not tech savvy. I can't ever claim I will be, but this is all now, this big movement is everyone sending their image. So this is another little thing we've done where we've put 10 alcohol markers in a kit. And again, this is just all the content, all the stuff you'd expect. So this is a little starter kit, all kinds of spin-offs. But yeah, we started it. Our first book's delivered in March, and we've sold over 2.3 million now since March.
Wow.
And they've just been selected by Target in the US. I've got a variety of new UK retailers who I've spent the last 3 years busy trying to get into. I'm hastening to add, it's my job, but suddenly people are coming to me now, and and it's been a good move, great move for the business. I mean, commercially, of course, but actually, it just drives that momentum, and people start taking notice and thinking, oh, look, these guys are talented at what they do. I've jumped on trends over the years. I sold a lot of Sudoku books when that all blew up first time, 15 odd years ago now. And I was in there early on that, which was great. And loom bands, we did loom band kits and, those dreaded rubber things that blocked up hoovers and everything. And these trends, fidget spinners, I haven't actually ever done a book based on a fidget spinner, but these trends are mega trends, and if you jump on it, you can sell a lot of stuff. We were second to the market behind Penguin Random House, who did Coco Wyo, who was one of the TikTok sensations. So they published the Coco Wyo books, and we were about a month behind because we jumped on it through TikTok and we just got ahead of the curve. And now I think there's 15 different publishers, or at least 15. I mean, I'm talking big publishers. There'll be all sorts of self-published. There already is. There is thousands of books out there, but we're fortunately being supported by big retailers. It's fantastic. And it's just, it's been a lot of pressure on the business from a production point of view and from a creative. But our illustrator, Sam Janey, who's super talented, who's done all of our books. She managed to do 12 books, and then she went off maternity leave, but she worked right up to the end. Well, she wanted to, because the more she worked, the more she got paid. But also I think
it's a passion thing. When you're in flow, I'd imagine as a designer, it's easy to stay in flow and you can get immersed and get as much joy out of creating it, knowing you're selling the volumes as well.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And my art director, Vanita, she's based in Plymouth. I should say most of the team are fully remote. Louis, myself, and we've got an administrator who's joined us recently, Emma, who works in Cheltenham. She just waved at me. She's across there. But there's only 3 of us in an office in Cheltenham, and then everyone else is remote. So Vanita's based in Plymouth, who's our art director, and super talented. And you hit the nail on the head. She absolutely got it. She gets it. She's got the design skills, but she sees the commercial opportunity. Well, she's so talented. She's made these, because if you can imagine, these come in as sort of black and white line art, and then she colorizes everything. And, quite frankly, it's, they all arrive like this, and she turns that cover in and,
Wow.
So she makes it look like the wonderful book it is. It's great. The creatives all want to get involved, and it's good fun. We've created sticker books, kits, books, pocket books. We've got a couple more concepts that are just coming across the table now.
Brilliant.
And we may as well, while we can.
Well, it's called diversification. And if you have what do they call it? Instead of spreading yourself thin on everything, is you double down on stuff. You niche down on something. If it works, you develop it a little bit more, which I'd imagine if you're working with creatives that you sound like you enjoy working with, there must be, like this, lots of rewarding interactions that you have all the time. And when the creative juices are going, you're like, it could be this, and this. And like you've had experience with the Australians saying, we're just going to fill a warehouse. Let's just fill the and have that sort of ambitious, not necessarily do it straight away.
Yeah.
But have that sort of creation with it.
No,
we
it really
talked about some of the fun sides of the publishing. I would imagine there's sort of perhaps a little bit of snobbery within publishing. Maybe retailers. Is that sort of now the ability to people self-publish and things like that? Is that sort of changing, or you're approaching it slightly different with Townhouse Books?
I think a combination of both, to be honest. So look, there used to be something called the net book agreement that was, up until about 30 years ago, meant that you had to sell a book at the printed cover price by English law, or it must have been UK law. I can't believe it'd be a European thing. But it was called the net book agreement, and it obviously just meant publishers got incredibly rich. And then it was actually the then chairman of ASDA, Archie Norman, who pushed it through the law court, saying, look, if I buy 250,000 copies of the new Harry Potter, I should be able to, even if I have to pay the publisher a net receipt of 50% off, £14.99 or whatever. So £7.50 I have to pay Bloomsbury. If I want to sell it for £5 in Asda, as a loss leader, because I want people to come in and buy Harry Potter and then buy 5 loaves of bread and 4 cartons of milk, I should be able to do that. And he was quite right. There's a free market out there. So it got pushed through. So the net book agreement then transformed publishing. When I opened up this conversation with Arcturus, that's how we positioned ourselves. So we were always selling into the volume retail. So the likes of the Works, county bookstores, Home Bargains, B&M, these, back in, county bookstores back in the day, they've always been driven by discounted pricing. And that was because they abolished the net book agreement. And I've always sold in that sphere. And a lot of publishers, they don't like it. I respect it. And, we put our heart and soul into our publishing program. But what I don't respect is to look at volume retailers like I work with Aldi, or if I work with B&M or Home Bargains. So I'm putting fantastic quality books on shelves here. And if Aldi sell them for £1.99, yes, it's an incredibly cheap price, but that puts 100,000 books into the hands of people who can't afford to go to Waterstones. And I just absolutely love Waterstones. We work with them through our trade program, and I want to see a bookstore like that thrive. Independent bookstores, they're thriving on the British High Street, and it is wonderful. And, and you wouldn't want it any other way. But there's room for everyone. That's my opinion. And I think it has changed. You only have to go into Aldi now, and there is all the trade houses, with their big, you'll see the Gruffalo, you'll see discounted editions of books being sold in Aldi by all publishers across the spectrum of what I would call more traditional trade publishers, and then more mass market publishers. And then I'd say Townhouse bridge the trade and mass market, because we've got a really nice quality look and feel. Everyone should have a chance to buy a book. That's my philosophy. We swear by it here, and it works. It makes commercial sense, most importantly, because without the commercials, there's no point doing it. We've sold millions of books to people who couldn't necessarily afford to pay the full price.
Full price on it.
Long may it continue.
And if we zoom out for a little bit, so right now, for sort of say success, we would define what success would be. Is it about numbers? Is it about creative projects that you've got, or is it simply knowing that books are reaching the right hands? And I think you've just alluded to it a little bit there, that it's about reaching some of the right hands.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it is. Look, what drives us is Lou and I, we've gone into business together. It's fantastic that we're great friends with, the friendship is nurtured through being in business for 3 years. We've got a fantastic team, really driven, it's a lean team. We really enjoy what we do. Of course, the commercials drive forward. Anyone who's, we're entrepreneurial here. We want our business to be a great success. We're not sitting there. I mean, I'm 48 years old. I've got, as you know, I've got two young sons. I'm not thinking of selling and going off to Marbella just yet. Someone offers me 10 million for it tomorrow. You never know.
Numbers talk, doesn't it?
Yeah. But no, we do it because we love it. We enjoy it. And fundamentally, you do it because you enjoy making books and bringing joy to people. And our books do, not all of them. We sometimes get an email saying, don't like it.
That's probably very few and far between, or that more often is incredible value. And I've just picked it up for this. It's amazing. My little so-and-so liked it or whatever. And I think then again, that's knowing, I'd imagine, coming back to like a Simon Sinek quote, I think, is you start with why. You know your why.
Yeah,
And that's what we want to get books into people's hands and have that enjoyment. A bit like my background being sport. You want to make sport available for all. You don't actually want to put in barriers to stop people getting there. You want to make it available.
absolutely. Yeah. But it's funny you brought that quote up, Ian, because that was one of the first books that my investor told me to read was Start With Why.
Why? Yeah, I saw
And
it
I did.
on
Uh,
talks.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I read it and I was about to do a deal and I knew it didn't really make sense margin wise and it could have caused me problems in North America. And anyway, I walked away and I phoned up the guy and I've known him for years and I just said, look, I know you've sent me the PO. I just can't take the deal. And we do loads together. So there was no damage to the relationship, but I did start with why. Why are you doing this? And even as much as I desperately needed some deals because it was in the infancy of Townhouse. So that was a bit of advice that I got to read that book. And that's another thing I should say that, as I say, he's a great friend, not just my investor. He's a really good guy, but I'm on his book club WhatsApp group now. So I've just finished Shoe Dog, which is the biography of Phil Knight from Nike. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're the Nike of publishing, not yet. But great disruptor, great entrepreneur. I mean, just a fantastic read. And you sit there and you did listen to it as an audiobook, actually. I do a lot of reading, but that's just another element of the relationship. He's a great, great, great mentor.
Well, that's what, again, it is a relationship. It's not just the money man, as it were, or the money
Mm.
person coming in. It's there. And if we sort of zoom out even more from that, what are some of the sort of the myths people might have around publishing that you would like to clear up? Is it sort of the dominance that people think you've got to be published by the big four, or everybody thinks they've got a book in them?
What are the myths? I'd say it's a very tough industry to get into, certainly as authors and illustrators. I think it is quite a closed book, and that is because everyone does think they've got a book in them in some respects, and I'm sure a lot of people do. But I think anyone could do it. I say, or certainly from a publishing perspective, or what we've done. I'd say anyone. It helps greatly if you've got years of experience in the industry. But it's in a great spot, publishing as an industry. Every other form of printed media, whether it be magazines, newspapers, even music, CDs. I know CDs and vinyl, they're having a little bit of a comeback, which is great. But fundamentally, a lot of media that moved to digital has moved there now. And, the magazine companies are struggling and it's hard, and newspapers sales are way down. But publishing, it still grows, and children's in particular. I'd say, like, in terms of the myths around it, anything is possible. That's you've got to dream big in anything you do. But with publishing, if you wanted to make a book and print it and sell it to someone, I firmly believe you can. It's there's a market there.
But then I suppose it's a bit like you could say if you're a professional footballer, everybody thinks in the crowd they're a professional footballer until they stand on the penalty spot under the pressure of 80,000 people and goodness knows how many billion people watching you kick and you fluff it and you get all the abuse from it. It's that, yes, you might have a great story, but actually to write a book, there's an art to it. The very, very good publishers and probably the very good authors make it look so easy. But actually doing it yourself to construct a story arc or put chapters in, to create characters and not get held up, or drawing book with children to allow that imagination and the questions around it, is an art in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is an art, but I think it's a great industry. I could have been a dive instructor in the Philippines. I could have been headhunting oil and gas executives, but
But that's probably not your why. Your why, by the looks of it, seems all about relationships and having that energy to start something, create something, exchange something of value, and allow that
absolutely.
relationship to nurture, which has been incredible. And what's ahead? What's ahead for Townhouse? What's, let's say, the next year, couple of years looking like? More of these
Oh, look,
colouring books and stuff like that?
Yeah, look, I think we will keep publishing in that space for sure while we can, and the more retailers and the more publishers worldwide we can open up. So our core business is very much in that space, and that is in the interactive board books and those more complicated projects that require safety testing and all of that. So that's really our core. That's where we'll focus on over the next couple of years. We'll certainly keep going. We do want to find another trend. Chatting with my partners in Australia and the US who bought huge numbers of the Sunny Vibes books in Canada, they're all expecting me to come to them now. They all think, oh, he's good, isn't he, Tom? What's the next trend? And I'm like, oh, geez,
Yeah.
we got to make up a trend or something. But, if you can jump on that, I mean, that would be the dream, to find what their next opportunity is. But I think we're going to keep doing what we do. I say we got a great team. We look after each other. We don't want anyone to leave. We want to keep doing exactly what we're doing, which is just growing the business, keeping it, all those things I learned originally of keeping it lean, take away some elements of the risk, try and pre-sell as much as possible. Just keep it a really simple, but also you do want to keep growing. And that is going to be a challenge. We will have a good year on the back of this Sunny Vibes. And, and then there's always the pressure, and it's good pressure. We've achieved great growth without it. Now we're going to get some stellar growth. Now, how do we keep growing? And it's the age old as any business. How do you do it? So I'll have to have a think about that.
Yeah. But if you come back to your why, you then know, won't you? It'll be there, and you do, like you say, get books into people's hands that possibly couldn't have get a book at all.
Absolutely. And yeah, no, it's wonderful. It's an exciting time. So we'll see.
Brilliant. Tom, this has been an incredible story, listening from your time in the French Alps to selling your first Eagle edition, to working in Australia, backpacking, taking wrong routes in LA. I'm sure there's some funny stories we can talk to you about that, but it's been a brilliant story unpacking where you are with Townhouse Books. And I wish you the best of the up and coming year, but thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, no, thank you, Ian. That's absolutely brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. Cheers for having me on.
Be a part of 360 Life Stories. Subscribe and join our emailing list to get exclusive insights, episode highlights, and behind-the-scenes stories straight to your inbox. It's the best way to stay inspired between episodes and never miss the next great conversation.